Peter.
What's going on, brother?
Another day, another dollar.
Yes, sir.
Tuesday, December 16th, 7:05 p.m. Everybody, welcome to the Ten-Four Tavern. Really appreciate everybody coming in. Live audience starting to fill in, looking great. Pete, how you doing? Everything all right? I heard you're a little bit under the weather. Got a little hot toddy going tonight?
Tommy, I have a hot toddy going on. I have a head cold that's just killing me. So I'm going to try not to cough or sneeze while live on the podcast here. But if I do, I'll mute myself to not be a disruption. So no, man, good to be here. Rough week for me because yesterday was a very tough anniversary of something that happened that candidly changed the trajectory of my life, to be honest with you. And that's the murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. Brian was patrolling Peck Canyon down in lower Arizona with a BORTAC team, some of federal law enforcement's most elite SWAT operators. And I know FBI HRT people and ATF SRT people hate when I say that, but I'm going to stand by that. What happened was they came upon a robbery crew, and Brian was shot in the back, and a bullet tore through his spinal cord and his aorta. And his team fought in some really inhospitable territory to try to save his life and apprehend the people that shot him. And it turned out one of the guns that was found at the scene was trafficked by people who were under investigation by a different part of ATF. And it turned out those folks let 2,200 guns fall into the hands of the cartels on purpose. And as you know, I blew the whistle on that. It was wound up because I told the truth about the U.S. Attorney's Office's ineptness. I wound up being under investigation for 4 years, which I would do it all over again because Brian Terry was a hero. And the most appalling thing about it is I've gotten to meet his family. I never met Brian in life. The guy was a beast, gentle giant, got into BORTAC with only 3 years on the job. I heard from sources that he did curls, dumbbell curls, not barbell, dumbbell curls in the gym. The conflict is whether they were 80-pound dumbbells or 90-pound dumbbells. And as a 30-year-plus gym rat, I'm quite envious of that. But he was a gentle giant. His family, who I have gotten to know, are some of the kindest people that you'd want as neighbors or coworkers or family members. And they've never been treated fairly by DOJ or by ATF. They've been kind of kept in the dark. So, yeah, I mean, his death really profoundly impacted me. And yesterday was the anniversary, and it weighed on me. So just wanted to mention it because hit the old saying, Tommy, the last time a hero truly dies is the last time his name is mentioned. I would love for everybody to mention Brian Terry's name tonight.
All right. Well, amen to that. Rest in peace, Border Agent Brian Terry.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thanks, Pete, and thanks for sharing. I know you shared it on LinkedIn yesterday, and we wanted to give you the first floor tonight to do that. But everybody, we have a great guest tonight. An old friend of mine I met many years ago, I want to say about 17, 18 years ago, out in Las Vegas with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. Lieutenant Tom Monahan, retired, currently the head of team security for the Las Vegas Golden Knights, which we'll get into it later in the episode. But really excited to have Tom. Tom, as I told you, I've met a lot of police officers, detectives, rank and file, supervisors, executives throughout the country. You're one of the people that really left an indelible mark on me when we met and we talked and some of the things you went through. So when Pete and I got this podcast up, you were a very short lister to reach out to and get to. So welcome to the Ten-Four Tavern. Really appreciate you coming on. We got a lot to talk about tonight. A couple of current capers that have gone out throughout the world, the United States and then overseas in Australia. And then we'll get a little bit into your career, Vegas, and then the stuff that you're doing now. Because any cop friend of mine who has hoisted a Stanley Cup over his head, we got to address that because I'm a big hockey guy. I'm supporting the Kraken. You work, is it the Kraken or the Knights? The Knights, right? The Golden Knights. Okay.
Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights, I should add.
I know. I mean, come on. Those guys, they came in the first season, the inaugural season, they were in the finals. I mean, come on. So really a great success. Would love to hear about that later. But welcome to the show, Tom. And you got to meet Pete in the green room tonight. So welcome.
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Thank you. And thank you for the flattering words.
Well, I think people will agree with me by the time we're done tonight. So before we do that, we're going to talk about it is the tavern, and we tell people it is the tavern. And just like old cops used to do, you shape up before the bar, before a caper, which, sometimes you do that. But realistically, we put some capers down and we go to the bar afterwards and we talk about it. And my mother-in-law could never figure it out. She's like, well, why can't you just stay in the office and talk? It's like, that's not how, I don't know. It's a tradition from way ever when. So that's why we called it the Ten-Four Tavern. And but we do encourage responsible drinking. Pete, because you're a little under the weather tonight, what are you drinking?
I'm having a hot toddy made with Basil Hayden, and note the mug, Tom. Note the mug.
Oh, Henry Repeating Arms. We had Anthony Imperato, CEO of Henry Repeating Arms, last week. He was a great guest, true patriot, and Pete is now flying the Henry colors. So see, Tom, if we get guests who represent, we might get swag for the next week. So
You
just
never
saying.
can tell. You never can tell.
Yeah. And then I'm doing an espresso martini, and I have my unique way of doing it. I do it in an old-fashioned glass, and I freeze leftover coffee and make large rocks out of the coffee, and then I take my martini. No martini glasses, old-fashioned glass with a rock, and this way it can last the whole night and stay cold. So that's the way I do it. And then, Tom, you're just drinking H2O, high-quality H2O.
Representing my alma mater, the Naval Postgraduate School.
Nice.
There you go. Perfect. Well, kudos to that, Naval Postgraduate. A fine institution, as I understand it. So, a couple of big capers have gone on in the world. You guys want to start Brown University? I think, Tom, with your experience in Vegas, also being a very high target for a lot of stuff, there was a caper that went down in the Mandalay Bay. You probably have a lot of knowledge about that and the Brown University active shooter. I think Ron Layson and Rob Lukash are going to talk about this tomorrow in active shooter responses. But I think with Pete, with your experience in the ATF, and Tom, with your experience in Vegas, and then the aftermath, and then the stuff at Mandalay, just take it from here, guys. My experience has never brought me into a mass shooting type of scenario, active shooter stuff. I just never was exposed to those. So I'm going to defer to you guys. I'll sit back and listen. Pete, thoughts on Brown University? You up to speed on what's going on this?
I am. In fact, I'll be speaking on News Nation about it tomorrow. But there's been some interesting developments. There's a student at the school who happens to be a Palestinian queer activist who they've started rampantly taking down. He had a website on the college's web, rather a web page on the college's website that was taken down. His personal social media has been taken down, X, everything. And if you look at his pictures and you look at the frame of the subject, it's pretty interesting. Could be him. I'm not saying it is. I'm not going to mention his name for that reason, because obviously it's just at this point, a theory. But a couple things I'll say is, I responded to a few mass shootings in my career. Parkland, the Fort Lauderdale Airport mass shooting, and I helped work on the Pulse case, and that we helped, figure out how Omar Mateen obtained a firearm. And I'll say this: these aren't tragedies, right? They're not. They're atrocities, because it's a human being planning to go. It's not like a hurricane or a car accident. It's someone plans to go out there and do harm to others. And I think as a country, we've been very lucky in that when these things happen, police get to the scene and take down the gunman, or the gunman shoots themselves. We haven't had one turn into a long-term manhunt. And, in this instance, I know the press conferences have been abysmal. And I hate to say that, because I've been on the other side as an executive sitting at those press conferences, and you want to, put good information out there. You don't want to misspeak. But I mean, they've been horrible. But one thing nobody ever mentions is, look, again, we've been lucky. And then sometimes these shooters, they have a cell phone on them, or they're driving their car, and we know cars can be tracked sometimes too. Or, they take their mask off close enough to the perimeter of the scene where a Ring doorbell camera or some business camera will get them. But absent some of those things that are big breaks for us, look, it's possible that this could take quite some time to solve. And look, we've all worked on homicides that aren't solved. So I know the media wants like instant gratification. They want stuff. There's a lot of bitching about the cameras. I've worked in corporate security, and I know that some really, really affluent companies have some pretty shitty cameras. I know there's some companies out there that have really good cameras. And when you look at the quality of the footage at Brown University, it's not great. But that's not unique to Brown University. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that need to work themselves out. This one could turn into a longer-term manhunt than we're used to. And, obviously I would love to hear what Tom thinks, but that's just my assessment on it for now.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I completely agree. I tend not to take a look at the investigations, because we all know that what we see is just the tip of the iceberg, and that there's a lot more going on that we never see. But the the one thing that you can count on these high profile cases is that the politicians are going to jump in. And when I say politicians, I mean those that are elected officials, but I also mean those that are appointed to higher police ranks beyond the civil service, testing process. And that's what we're seeing in Providence. You're seeing the mayor up front. You're seeing the attorney general up front. You're seeing the chief of police kind of taking a back seat. And that just bodes poorly for any investigation. The examples are plentiful in terms of why a PIO should always be appointed on these high profile cases and not the chief of police. When the media asks a question, a PIO can legitimately say, I don't know, I don't have that information. Or a PIO could legitimately say, I'm not at liberty to provide that information. If a chief of police or a high-ranking official says that, then if they say, I don't know, then the question is, why not? And if they say, I'm not at liberty to give you that information, then the realistic question is, well, who's really in charge? So that's why it's absolutely best practice to set your ego aside and let the PIOs do their work. Secondly, it's been my experience that whenever it's and I hate to say this, but murders happen all the time where the chief of police is involved and the mayor is involved and the attorney general isn't involved. And those would be ground up investigations where the detectives and the crime scene investigators and all of the people that do this every day are doing the work. When you get these high profile cases, somehow there's this feeling that the higher the profile, the higher the rank is necessary. And so you go from the bottom up investigation to a top down. And that seldom works out well for an investigation.
Yeah. Agreed 100%.
Yeah. So we've had a PIO, two PIOs. We had Carla and then Rob Tefano. And it's right in line with what you're saying, Tom, is like and I think Carla really was in a good place because she said that the chief let her do her thing and put her out on capers. And I don't know how many big sensational global cases she was involved in, but even still, the egos fly, especially down in Florida with the sheriffs, man. You always see a sheriff doing all the talking, and boy, do they get boisterous and they make some pretty interesting claims. But then we had Gary McCarthy on as well, and we talked about the Ferguson caper and how the communications was just a debacle on that thing. And so all of these cases really need truly professional people. And I think either you can find a talented cop who's really smart and really energetic towards learning how to be a communications expert, or you need to go and hire a real true communications expert. Because taking a cop and just saying you're now the PIO and get out there and you're that doesn't work. And we've seen that fail miserably over and over and over again. And this Brown thing, let's a little bit of I as a former homicide, not a detective, but sergeant and lieutenant in those cases and a former detective, but I never really want to analyze the case through the information we get from the media, because we know, the three of us know, it's not even close. That being said, they had somebody in custody, let him go. And then have you seen the videos? This guy's size and gait, I can't believe they don't have an ID yet.
Yeah. No, but Tommy, let me tell you something. There's something that we haven't touched on. When I was in charge of the Parkland shooting, I made a statement early on because we knew that Nicholas Cruz legally bought the gun. He lawfully bought the firearm that was used in that particular case. I caught hell from DOJ. I caught hell from the sheriff, Scott Israel, because he wanted to make it about the gun, right? Because he was never more than 20 feet from Debbie Wasserman Schultz during that whole investigation, by the way. But the interesting thing is, the media was going to local gun dealers, and we were moving out from where the shooting happened and we went out further and further, and we determined he bought 7 guns. One of those guns, the media got to the dealer before we did. So I do think that sometimes there's justifiable pressure in getting information out, because you don't want to release too much information. You want to release something. You want it to be good. But I don't think folks realize how hard the media will try to beat you to that investigative lead We had media canvassing gun shops throughout all of Florida after the Parkland shooting. And yeah, we had a sheriff, and to your point, a very vocal, second largest sheriff's department in the country was pissed that we wouldn't name the gun dealer because it was a lawful purchase. He named the gun dealer because, again, he wanted to make it about the gun, and that gun dealer was pushed out of business. So, I mean, it's a delicate line that you have to walk when you're working these kind of cases, because you want justice for the victims. You want to put the bad guy in jail, but there's a lot of things that folks don't realize happen in the periphery that you got to be careful about. Look, it sucks dealing with the media because they're not fair players, man. They play dirty.
Right. And if I could add on to that, they will report information that they have. And then the police leaders hear this on the news and it's contradictory to what you just told them.
Yes.
And they're like, why am I hearing this from CNN? Well, I don't know. It's not true, because there's no consequences to bad information being reported by the press. They simply, if they choose to, they can make a retraction. Oftentimes they don't. They'll say, well, initial reporting was wrong. But I assure you, if a homicide detective or sergeant or lieutenant passes bad information up, there are consequences.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other point I'd like to make is these are early Christmas presents for media executives, because these type of events drive fear, and fear drives eyeballs on televisions, and it drives clicks on social media. And so these are early Christmas presents for media executives.
Sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is. Any final thoughts on what's going on in Brown? And we're going to shift because we're going to go to LA, and there's also a communications breakdown and some things happen. And I know the people involved personally, so I definitely want to get into that. Any final thoughts on what's going on in Brown? Anything that we can switch over?
I just hope there's a break and there's some actual evidence that will lead them to the right bad guy, and that we can put this thing behind us. Because look, I mean, Tom knows better than I do. Rhode Island is a small state. It's got a small town mentality, and the people that live there are in fear, and they don't deserve to be in fear. So, I mean, once we have legitimate evidence that can be followed up and they can make an arrest and they can announce, where they're going with it, I just think the community will breathe a little bit easier. But yes, look, I got to be honest, and we talked about it before. So far, the press conferences, man, they've been about as bad as I've seen. But it is what it is, man. I know those things aren't easy.
Well, to Tom's point, let the pros do it. I mean, listen, I'm going to say this. The police chief in Providence has a heavy accent. I have no idea if he's a good guy or not a good guy. I don't know if he's competent or not. Seems like a nice enough guy, but I don't even understand him. And so the communications and what he's saying doesn't mean he's not a great leader, but the way he's delivering the information, he's not, to Tom's point, he's not the professional that should have been trained and qualified. What do we say? How do we say it? How do we put this information out? And, I hate to say it, to your point, Tom, is like, is it because I'm the chief, so of course I'm going to do it? I mean, I actually was doing a press conference once where they said, get in the picture, and I kept eking out of it. And then the executive was saying, get back in here, get back in here. I was like, no, I don't want to be in there. I don't want to be in there.
NYPD was the worst at it. I mean, look, they didn't let PIOs talk. They had, and for a while, Ray Kelly was the only one to talk. And look, to be honest, and going along with Tom said, as a SAC, I didn't do all the press for the ATF field division in Miami. But if it was something that was on the Attorney General's radar, I was expected to. A little inside baseball, I'm going to piss some people off. When the shooting happened out in Las Vegas, the special agent in charge of the field division at the time, I won't mention her name, didn't show up for days. And she caught hell because some brand new GS-14 group supervisor was stuck answering to the media, and the Attorney General was absolutely furious, as was the ATF director. So, I mean, that's the thing that sucks. I agree with you. You have people that are trained. They would do tons of training to speak to the media. Let them do their job. But politics, sometimes intra-agency politics screws everything up. And sometimes it's, local councils, mayors, attorney generals of the United States that also, bring politics into it. So, yeah, we're on the same page.
So normally we're flowing really good, and I don't bring a lot of the chats in. But Providence, Rhode Island press conference was cringeworthy. But Ray Kelly, NYPD police commissioner, he didn't even let anybody talk, not even the chief of the department, Joe Esposito. Yeah. So they have their ways. All right. next one, because there's also a communications mess up here. Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer, husband and wife, married 30 some odd years, 4 children. Rob Reiner has a daughter from a previous marriage to Penny Marshall. They were stabbed and killed in a double homicide in Brentwood. What I want to talk to Tom about, and Pete, to the amount that you can weigh in, what's it like to work on a celebrity sensational homicide? And again, not a mass shooting, but now a single or a double or triple homicide, or your standard homicide cases, homicide investigations, but with the global reach of these celebrities. What's that like? Again, I never had one of those. I did have Mike Tyson as a defendant in an assault case, but not a homicide victim or a perpetrator. So I'm not familiar with this sensation. New York cases, yes. New York centric, yes, but certainly not national, certainly not global. Just never had those. The communications part I want to raise, and then I'm going to go back to you guys for the more experienced perspectives. Alan Hamilton, the chief of detectives in LAPD, a really good guy, I know him personally, very capable, very competent guy, put out a statement, got on a press conference and said, we're not releasing the information. We're not telling you this. We're not telling you that. It's too early right now. I really don't have a lot to tell you. We're still following for the integrity and investigation, essentially is what he said. At the same time, Mayor Bass had already given out all the information. I am giving Alan Hamilton the benefit of the doubt, and the chief of police there, Jim McDonald, is a great guy, also a great leader, former LA sheriff, LAPD. He's a Boston guy, by the way, Tom, and a Bruin fan. I think Bobby Orr might have been his favorite player. He's also a great guy. I don't see this as a failure on their part. I think the mayor's office, in my opinion, might have gotten in front of their skis. I'm going to go to you guys.
Well, it isn't a lot different and is reminiscent of it was the Night Stalker case in LA back in the early 80s when Dianne Feinstein was the mayor of San Francisco, and she released some very critical information. It wasn't the identity of the killer, but she had released some information that law enforcement was keeping very close hold, and it severely compromised the case. Now, your police leaders they're stuck. They have a chain of command that they have to report to, and it's appropriate that we follow those orders. It's equally as appropriate that those elected officials understand that they may be damaging the case and potentially their political careers, but it never seems to work out that way.
Yeah. So Pete, what are your thoughts on what's going on out there in LA right now with the
it's interesting. It's super high profile. I mean, let's be honest. Meathead was part of our family growing up, right? We all watched All in the Family. I don't agree with his politics, but he was in our house, every week for years. So I don't like to see what happened. A couple things though. I never worked on a case where a celebrity was killed. I've had cases where celebrities were mentioned as perhaps as defendants. P. Diddy being one of them. Back then he was known as Puff Daddy in a murder in Co-op City. We were never able to prove who actually committed the murder. His bodyguard's name came up, the guy Wolf that got pinched with the gun when he was in the car with J-Lo. There was talk back then that he might have had some involvement in the first shooting of Tupac Shakur, but then there were other rumors that a guy named Haitian Jack did it, a guy named Jack Agnant, but again, that was never proven. So, but yeah, they got a lot of traction. A lot of people were interested, but it's a different animal. I mean, it wasn't a celebrity being murdered. So, I've never had to deal with that. And I don't envy those investigators because people, again, a lot of people jump to conclusions, a lot of questions, some questions that perhaps shouldn't even be asked or answered. So, yeah, they have a heavy lift, but terrible incident. But hey, Tommy, let's go a little further. Apparently the son had some mental health issues and some substance abuse issues with using drugs. I heard crystal meth, for example. Let's look at our society, man. I remember growing up when you had people that were just off the rails. They wouldn't take their meds. There was a place for them. They put them in mental hospitals, institutions. They're gone away. We don't do anything in our country anymore to care for those who were so messed up psychologically that they can't take their medication and they can't be trusted amongst the public. So we see this again and again and again. You have this incident. You have something vastly different. It's the incident that happened on the car on the train car in Charlotte. Right, there was an instance that happened very recently in a department store in New York City where a woman with mental health issues bought a knife, walked into the dressing room and stabbed the woman as she was changing her child. I mean, we need to do a better job as a society in handling the folks that have mental health crises and issues, because it's not working, and good people are dying as a result.
Tom, any thoughts on this?
Whenever the case is high profile, it adds that additional dimension of again there's an expectation that the higher the profile, the higher the rank is going to be leading the investigation, and that is it's contrary to best practice. There was an investigator that worked the DC sniper case, and he said not every cop is equipped to manage homicide investigations.
Sure.
And there are some people, when I was in homicide, that say I could never do what you do, and I would turn to them that say we're riding motorcycles and doing traffic. I'm like, I could never do what you do.
Right.
But everybody has an aptitude and everybody has an interest. And then there's this expectation, and we'll talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Tupac, if you'd like. And there's this expectation that that's the only case that the detectives are working.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simply not the case. We'd work 150 murders a year. Do the math. That's one every couple days. And so a homicide team had at best 30 days to work a case before the next one, rolled up on his desk. And so we don't have the luxury like on television where you only have one case and you work it until it's solved and put away. That's a luxury we don't have.
For sure. I listen, like I said, I never had a global, barely a national case, but a lot of New York sensational cases. That's just like your worst nightmare as the commander. You're like, I didn't even want the Mike Tyson assault case. Like, never mind a homicide that has those kinds of implications. And Bobby Boyce, the chief of detectives, was on a couple of episodes. We talked about some serious sensational cases. And I asked him, I said, when I have homicides in my office that are pretty well known throughout the city, and I feel that top-down pressure coming from you, Bobby Boyce, when you have this national or global case and you're the chief of detectives in New York City, what is the pressure coming from the mayor's office and the police commissioner on you? And how does that feel? Because I'm glad you're now getting a taste of what you do to me on a more regular basis, And
right.
like I just want to work and just leave us alone, stay out of our way, get out of our way. And I'm going to shout out to a buddy, Chris, who's probably watching somewhere right now. We had some cases in New York City where we had 2 cases back to back, 2 days in a row. Chris caught a double, a mom and a child. And then the day before that, we had a New York City marshal killed doing a lawful eviction in the performance of his duty. And I was in the mayor's office 2 days in a row to do press conferences. And that was one of those ones where I was scooching out of the way. And I was like, this is so they were calling up going, Tommy, I got 50 detectives staged across the street. I got this going on. I got that going on. I've got detectives doing canvases. I go, stop. We've got this. No, you don't. Yeah, we do. And they're like, no, I'm insisting you get all these resources. 50 detectives are staged across the street on Atlantic Avenue. Go use them. And I grabbed Kenny Finn, my sergeant. I go, send them as far away as you possibly can and tell them to knock on doors. And then the gang unit is coming in, filling out forms, follow-up informationals, and saying, oh, we didn't identify any gang tagging or any graffiti in the area. Good, because this has nothing to do with gangs. What are these chiefs doing, and who are they sending us, and why are you? Please just get out of the way. And I'll just stop there. I'll leave it there. But for sure. Any final thoughts on the Reiner case? Oh, the last thing I wanted to say is we have in New York City, I live in Virginia now, a Virginia assemblyman Cray Deeds, nice guy. Not my side, but a nice guy. And my side is I'm in the middle. So it's not right or left. I just don't agree with the way he voted. However, he's a gentleman. And Cray Deeds had exactly the same situation with his son. And he got stabbed in his car by his own son. And thankfully, Cray Deeds survived. So this Rob Reiner case has a lot of what we went through about 10 years ago locally here with one of our local politicians. So the mental health illness stuff that you talked about also resonates for sure.
Hey, Tommy, the family of the stabber of that poor young Ukrainian girl in the train car, when they interviewed the family was aghast that he was out. Like, they tried to get him help. I mean, that's how bad it is. When you have family members that, hey, man, my relative, my loved one cannot be in the streets, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. It wasn't like that years ago. So, but the problem is no one wants to stigmatize anybody. You know, we want to be nice to everybody. And the problem is there's some people who will never be nice back because they can't be. It's not that they want to be that way. There's something going on in their head that doesn't wire them the way we're wired.
Well, one final thought. I moved from New York City to Charlottesville, Virginia. I live in a rural area of a suburb of Charlottesville, Virginia. I live about 25 minutes, 30 minutes outside of town. Population, small town, population about 7,000. We had a double homicide with an assault rifle in our supermarket shopping parking lot, and the family said exactly the same thing. We've been begging for help, and you guys didn't, and now here we are. And thank God a federal agent was in the parking lot. He killed 2 people and was ready to go. Yeah. And a federal agent, armed, active duty federal agent, terminated the assault, and thank God for that. And he's a hero. And we still don't know his name. By the way, I have no idea. My own neighbor saved many, many people's lives. But more important, the mental health thing is the family said, we've been asking for help for 10 years, and look where we are.
Which is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because, I mean, they're victims too. You know what I mean? Because they wanted to do something and they couldn't. They're victims just as much as anybody else in the community, and that's terrible.
Yeah. Okay, Bondi Beach, Australia. 2 father and son team start shooting assault rifles. And again, we can tie back to Mandalay a little bit with you, Tom. Active shooter, high casualty rate, not anywhere near Mandalay, obviously, but still very significant, very serious. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's funny. That guy who disarmed one of the shooters is an absolute hero. And I've heard some people criticize, like, why didn't he just shoot the guy? And I think that's unfair, frankly. Look, it could be one of 2 things.
Well, do you know why? He's never held a gun in his life. He never held a gun in his life before that incident.
Correct. Well, but the thing is, did he not want to shoot the guy? That could be thinking, look, that's honorable. You don't want to kill somebody. I'm not going to question you for that. The other thing is that was a bolt action rifle. So had that person not cycled the next round into the chamber, he could have very well pulled the trigger and it didn't discharge, and he wouldn't have known how to make it discharge. So, but heroic, tragic in many, many ways. And look, as you know, Tommy, I spent my entire life going after people who misuse firearms in crimes. It's not the gun, it's the criminal. And when you look at Australia right now, you hear the Prime Minister, they're going to strengthen their gun laws. An armed good guy could have taken out an armed bad guy. You know, I philosophically, I don't agree with where they're going. Look, would I prefer if in life there was never a need to invent a firearm? Yeah, hey, that's great. But look, nowadays where you can print guns at home, and if you have a 3D printing, you can manufacture firearms. People are going to get guns one way or the other. And if bad guys are the only ones that have guns, we're in a bad place.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take this conversation in a different direction. And that is that the officials in Australia have come out and confirmed that the motivation of this attack was ISIS inspired. They found the ISIS flags inside the truck, and that would make it the 5th ISIS inspired terrorist attack since 2006 in what we'll call the Western world. Yeah. Pete, you were at the Pulse nightclub attack in Orlando.
Correct.
That was ISIS inspired. More recently, the guy that drove the truck down Bourbon Street in New Orleans just this past New Year's Eve, the guy that drove the pickup truck up the High Line in Lower Manhattan,
Yes.
Yep.
Going back to 2015 in San Bernardino, the county building there, that was ISIS inspired. So, I forget which politician said it, but it's absolutely true. We can't take our eye off the ball. Yes, there is a problem with domestic extremism. Yes, there is violence that is domestic, but we can't take our eye off the ball. There is still the international terrorism dimension that's still out there and still providing a threat.
And then, look, there was a question, Tommy, that you had highlighted that's not highlighted anymore. It's from New York Crim. Why in today's age are there uniformed police officers in some countries unarmed? Insane. Something, I worked for a guy after I left government who was a former cop in the UK. And his partner was stabbed to death in front of him. And he tried to fight back, couldn't do anything. They had a call for the weapons unit because cops in the United Kingdom generally aren't armed. That is absolutely absurd. And I don't understand in today's day and age where you have terrorists operating throughout the globe. You have the proliferation of firearms trafficked throughout the globe. How you can justify having unarmed police is, to me, mind-blowing. Because, what do you stop, or I'll say stop again? What are your, what are you going to do if you're a law enforcement officer and you see something really bad happen and you don't have the ability to take instant action to end it? How do you live with that? And again, it's the department's fault. But if I was a law enforcement officer and watched my partner get stabbed to death and I couldn't stop it, I would have a hard time living with that. And this gentleman absolutely did have a hard time living with that. It's terrible. It's stupid.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, guys, any final thoughts on Bondi Beach, what's happened there? We'll see how that plays out. Again, it'll probably disappear out of the news cycle for us in the U.S. here, and Australia will do that.
I do have one to add. The gentleman who disarmed the shooter, and again, didn't shoot him for whatever reason, they asked him why. And he was shot twice himself. And he said he was grateful to Australia for taking him in as a citizen. We're a melting pot, right? The United States is a country built with immigrants, legal immigration. People came here and wanted to assimilate and become Americans. Clearly, this gentleman, while he retained his pride in his Muslim religion and he kept his identity, he was proud to be an Australian. We need to make sure that happens again throughout the world, where people move into a country because they want to be part of that country, not to bring their country to the new country and set up a new culture. That's just me getting on a soapbox for a minute.
Well, that's a continuation of last week's conversation with Anthony Apparato last week. Yeah. We're same thing. We love the immigration, but we want you to become American and absorb the American culture and American fundamentals and the Constitution of the United States of America. Tom, final thoughts on the Bondi Beach, the mess, and then we're going to get to you, buddy.
Other than, these things are bound to happen because terrorists. There's an old statement made by a very bright guy, by Brian Michael Jenkins. And he said, terrorists want a lot of people watching, not a lot of people dead. And that's absolutely true. I wrote a chapter in a book on terrorism, and I kind of paraphrased it. And I said, terrorists want a lot of people scared, not a lot of people dead. Right. And so I think that's their motivation. That's why these shootings occur at places where people congregate. Incidentally, it's interesting to note that, the attack in San Bernardino happened at a Christmas party. Yep. The attack in Bondi Beach happened on Hanukkah. The Highline truck attack occurred on Halloween. Bourbon Street occurred on New Year's Eve. So these type of mass gatherings, these type of celebrations are going to continue to be attractive targets for our enemy.
100%. Yep. Spot on.
Yep. All right, we're going to switch up, but before I do that, I just need to do a shout out in a negative way. At Sharon Bean -J8J, whoever you are, we are a First Amendment free speech. If you've got an alternative viewpoint, but just getting on here and talking craziness and saying crazy chats where you've been banned and comments were removed, because we're talking about police work, we're talking about world problems here, and we're not talking craziness. So enough was enough. So again, if you have something productive for or against a particular argument, we're happy to have that. But just craziness is just not going to be tolerated. We're not going to do that. All right. So Tom Monahan, I understand from knowing you that you grew up in Boston and you make your way to Las Vegas. Take us through that. How does that go? This is all about Tom Monahan for the rest of the show.
Yeah, I grew up in New England. Was born in Worcester, Mass. You have to pronounce that correctly, otherwise they know you're not. Went to high school in Rhode Island, so I know a bit about Brown University. Got my degree from Boston University and needed a job. And so I sent out resumes, and it just so happened that Vegas was hiring. Took the test, and then in April of 1985, I loaded up a Datsun 310 with rusted out floorboards and plywood on the floors, and I made my way out west. And what a wild ride it's been. In 1985, the city, and it's important to understand, the city of Las Vegas is relatively small to what people think is Las Vegas. For example, the entire strip actually exists outside of the city limits. It's in the unincorporated county. But back to the story. So the jurisdiction that I work in had a population less than 500,000, and the police department had fewer than 100 employees. We're now 2.5 million, and the police department employs 6,000 people. So I got in at the ground floor. They tested 1,300 for the written test. They hired 50, 26 graduated the academy, and about 13 of us finished field training out of the 1,300. So,
wow.
What was the reason for that attrition rate?
Just, they could do whatever they wanted. There was, we didn't have to worry about it.
You had to earn it. You had to earn it back then, man.
Yeah.
It's like being a Navy SEAL.
Yeah. And of course, I drove out there, for me, long-term planning, I'm 23 years old. Long-term planning is supper, right? I never dreamt that I'd be here 40 years later. 3 kids, 2 grandkids, and I'm still here. And of course, I never would dream that there'd be professional hockey in the desert either. But because I came in when the department was really going through a growth spurt, I had opportunities that I wouldn't have had if it was an older department that wasn't growing quite so quickly. So in '87, there was a brand new epidemic, this thing called crack cocaine, and it had made its way from LA and was causing all kinds of violence. So the lieutenant came into a briefing one day, and of course, back then, most of the uniformed patrolmen were all Vietnam vet. They were all Vietnam era vets. Yes. So the lieutenant comes in and says, "Hey, we're starting this new unit undercover working street narcotics. Who wants in?" And they all booed and threw their, coffee butts or their cigarette butts at him. And he said, "Well, who do you think?" And they said, "Call Monahan. He's stupid enough to do stuff like that." So I got the phone call, and that started that. I spent some time working undercover. I spent time in Vice, and then got promoted like most of us. Spent some time back in patrol as a sergeant. Got promoted to lieutenant. I spent some time as the commanding officer out at the airport, which was a real educational experience because I learned about budgets and politics and stuff like that. I got picked to head up our sex crimes unit. So worked rapes and child molest cases and those types of cases. Started the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force back then, because child predation was computers were relatively new. Then homicide came up. I got picked for that job. After 5 years of that, about 600 murders and about 100 officer-involved shootings. Then it was after 9/11, and they started the counterterrorism unit and this brand new thing that nobody had heard of called fusion centers. And I think, Tommy, that's where you and I first crossed paths.
Yes, we did. And not only that, but on social media, Ron Brooks, who was a previous guest of the Finest Unfiltered Ten-Four Tavern podcast a couple of weeks ago, did a shout out and said, if Tom Monahan is on, I'm watching. So Ron won't watch any of our other episodes except for his and yours. So
Well, Tom was a mentor of mine because when it came to law enforcement politics, he holds the master class. Like that, he is the Yoda of police politics.
well, you know, the funny thing is you mentioned Dianne Feinstein, and he was really good friends with her.
Right.
And so talk about knowing how to work the political side of how that all works. There you go. He got a first-class
100%.
education, probably one of the best.
100%. 100%. So we started up the Fusion Center. That was quite an experience because I'm a cop, right? And now all of a sudden you're talking about intelligence. So police work is you gather evidence that will be presented in court that will lead to a single truth, which will ultimately lead to a conviction. And you contrast that to the intelligence world where you have lots of pieces of information, not evidence, information that will lead to multiple hypotheses that may or may not lead to even a crime that probably will never lead to a conviction. So for a guy who spent his whole career working sex crimes and murders, this was a complete paradigm shift. But nevertheless, did that, had a lot of experience, at a national and global level. And then the job for aviation search and rescue came up, and I am a pilot. So the notion of going out and climbing mountains and flying helicopters, and that was pretty appealing after, shining my ass on an office chair for the past few years. And then finished my career as the number 2 guy for the Strip Command. So everything comes full circle. Ended up back in uniform, just with a lot more service stripes on my sleeve.
That's some career, man. Very diverse career too. Some folks focus on an investigative track. You've touched on a lot of things. I have a question for you, Tom, and it's a question that comes from a previous guest, because obviously Las Vegas, very interesting city. I'll confess I've only been there once. I gave a speech at SHOT Show a couple of years back, which was great, really cool show. But the attendance was mind blowing. So yeah, NSSF does a good job with that thing. But a friend of mine, our first guest, Carlos Canino, had to come out there from Los Angeles when he was an agent out there back in the early 90s, I guess. It was the first time Tyson was boxing, and he was coming out to do some surveillance of some targets. And I guess the events in Las Vegas bring in a lot of hitters, people with money, people that are players in certain communities. And so he reached out to your department and said, hey, man, we need some help. Can you help coordinate it? And when he got there, he was shocked that there were many other police departments doing similar things of other targets. I guess other people that are players in whatever world they're in that want to show off who they are by going to these sorts of events. And he was truly impressed and taken back by how coordinated the Vegas PD was with getting all of these different police departments zoomed in on target and coordinating these various different surveillances that were going on at one time with all the other shit going on at the event. We have to worry about normal things, normal security. Anything you could provide as far as insight on how the Vegas PD does that? Because I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of anything like that happening somewhere else. So when Carlos asked me to ask you that question, it really spurred my interest as well.
Yeah, so you're 100% correct. I mean, all nefarious roads seem to lead through Vegas. I mean, Las Vegas, there are more fugitives that are captured by the U.S. Marshals Task Force and stuff like that. More are captured in Vegas than anywhere else, simply because of the nature, the anonymity, perhaps the fact that, cash is king here, more so than many other places. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And of course, the criminal element. We had a strong organized crime. Back in the 80s, it was dominantly Italian. Now, very little Italian organized crime. Now it's mostly Eastern European. But yes, it doesn't surprise me at all. I participate in some of those coordinating events. Tommy and I have a mutual friend. I think he retired as the chief inspector, Tom Galati. That's how we first met and remained friends 30 years later. So it's, but those types of investments pay off dividends. So because we participate, because we assist in the coordination, when something happens in another city, we've got a phone number. We can pick up the phone and call an individual, not PBX, and hope to be speaking to somebody. We've got Rolodexes that are pretty large, and it's a small investment for a big payoff.
Yeah. Look, the real world doesn't realize how much law enforcement networking happens and how valuable it is. So that's great. I have a question, and I know we don't want to besmirch an entire community, but when you say the Italians were pushed out by Eastern Europeans, what group of Eastern Europeans predominantly was involved? Was it by any chance Albanians?
No, and I didn't say they were pushed out. I said that they have less of a presence now, and mostly because of the investigations. And if you've watched the movie Casino, you'll know what I'm talking about. And incidentally, if you didn't know this, nearly every single scene in Casino is based on in real life. I can tell you the players who were involved for nearly every one of those scenes. Yeah, no,
and I bring it up only because in the Bronx, we had a very large Albanian presence. And in some areas that were very heavily controlled by the Italian mafia, the Albanian mafia came in and pushed them out. And there was one instance where they had a place where the big thing was Joker Poker and all these like electronic video games, and they would pay out. And there was a mob captain from the I'm not sure if it was the Bonanos, but I think it was the Bonanno crime family, who owned one of these places. And the Albanians came in and put guns on the table and said, "This place is ours now." And the guy's like, "Hey, you don't know who you're dealing with." So they beat the living shit out of this guy. So he came back with some of his mob guys that he had to call. But by this time, the Italian mob had moved to the suburbs. So he's calling his people that are coming in from Mayapack, New York or wherever. And the Albanian guy just walks outside and blows a whistle and the building's empty out. And they stopped the living shit out of a bunch of Italian guys that drove in from the suburbs. So, look, they were fearless. And there's a lot of Italian neighborhoods that are now Albanian, occupied and Albanian controlled. So that's the only reason why I asked. But anyway.
Right.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That's wild. So Tom, let's go. Great career, great trajectory. I don't know how did it feel going back to uniform after some of the stuff that you did from the homicide and then counterterrorism and going back to uniform? Once I got out of uniform and I was doing the investigative stuff, I didn't take a captain's exam for exactly that reason. I just never wanted to ever put that bag back on. I love doing it 5 or 10 times a year on a detail. New Year's Eve, I was at every New Year's Eve every single year. I love that. I love the Halloween parade, but I like putting my uniform on 5 times a year, not every day. How'd that feel going back?
I thought it was going to be a lot more fun than it turned out to be. Policing had changed dramatically. This was 2013, I think. So everybody's walking down the strip, and if you make contact with them, they pull out a cell phone camera, and there was definitely a lot less respect for authority and just common courtesy. So the policing that I remember just wasn't there. I've got a son. He's a detective now. He's been on close to 10 years. He doesn't know any difference. So he was in the academy when they were issuing body cameras. So he doesn't know any different. And in all truth, I had nothing left in the gas tank. I was showing up to work, but I was just going through the motions. And you talk to anybody, yourselves included, if you look into yourself, say, that was when I knew that it was time to retire.
Yeah. And you want to go out on top in a good way. You don't want to be miserable and say, I'm in a good place. I've done a good thing, but it's time to move on. I'll be honest with you. I left way too early, personal reasons, maybe for another day, another time, another conversation. I did not want to leave. If it was up to me at the time, once I landed in the detective bureau as a lieutenant, I expected to be retiring next month. So
I see.
But life, you play the hand you're dealt. But what one mentor did tell me was you want to leave when you're on top, when you're doing good work, and you're not miserable, you're not grouchy, you're not angry, you're not pissing people off, you're not kicking the dog when you walk in the house, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say I left just shy of 30 years, and everybody says, "Well, why didn't you just stick it out for the full 30?" Well, I had a job through the Naval Postgraduate School. I had a job waiting for me in Washington D.C. So I retired in June and started work in D.C. on the other side of the country in July.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You also got to seize an opportunity, right? So,
right.
Okay, so let's go back. So like you walked us through a bunch of your assignments, going through what do you think is different about being in vice and narco and sex crimes in Vegas because of and maybe it's not different, but I bet you every other cop in the country thinks it's very different. Is it different? And if it is different, how?
So let's kind of peel that apart bit by bit. A lot of people think that prostitution is legal in Las Vegas. It is not legal in Las Vegas. It is legal in 15 of the 17 counties in Nevada. So you can drive 40 minutes away and go to a legal brothel, but in the city it is not. Now, it's not aggressively enforced. They enforce it just enough to kind of keep a lid on it so that it's not so body that couples can't walk down the street without being, accosted. But because there's a certain expectation, it's plentiful. I did an episode, the first season of the TV show Cops, Bad Boys, Bad Boys. So I was on an episode, we filmed it at the brand new Mirage Hotel Casino. In 1989, it would air in 1990, but at the time, there was a lot of Saudis that were on the strip. And so if you've ever seen that particular episode, I called through the yellow pages, which goes to show you how old it was. We actually go through the yellow pages and dialed the phone.
That's fantastic.
And a couple hookers showed up. So, but, and then Narcotics. Vegas is a city just like any other. We have street gangs, we have drug problems, we have, everything that a big city has. So in that regard, aside from the neon, it's just like New York, it's just like Newark, it's just like LA, Denver.
Yeah. So two comments on Vegas.
I just saw that. Do things in Vegas really stay in Vegas? Not exactly. Things in Vegas ended up on my desk on Monday morning.
So shout out to Chief Rob Lukash. He's a retired chief of the NYPD and one of the hosts on one of our sister shows, The Executive Perspective. Him and Ron break down police procedural stuff and responses to crimes and give their take on incidents. So thanks, Rob, for that. It's funny. And then I took the quote and I used it on social media this week when in The Hangover, when the mattress is hanging on the statue and the guy's looking up and he goes, "Some guys just can't handle Vegas." Like, do people really lose their minds more in Vegas than anywhere else?
100%. 100%. That is, people will come from, I'll pick Topeka, Kansas. And they will do stuff in Vegas that they would never dream of doing in their hometown because Vegas kind of encourages that type of behavior. You can drink all night. There are no clocks in the casinos. So you can drink all night. There's nobody there to say, last call, get out, right? It doesn't happen. The last time they stopped selling booze was the day after Kennedy got shot in '63.
Wow.
So there's nobody to make sure that you're behaving. People drink too much. They don't sleep enough. And again, the whole nature of Vegas is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, Tom. Yeah. I know the casinos are pretty high speed with their surveillance and they're pretty aggressive in dealing with people who are potentially cheating or doing other things that they shouldn't do. What's the relationship like with casino security and law enforcement? Is it like perfect? Are there rivalries? Is it strained? I'm just curious, only because I know that they're very aggressive. and they take what they do very seriously. But I know sometimes that can lead to some organizational egos, so to speak. So how's the relationships?
Everybody in the police department recognizes we couldn't do our jobs without them.
Okay.
It's a simple fact of the matter. And in fact, there's kind of an agreement where hotel security takes whatever problems up to the sidewalk. And they are well paid. They are by and large well trained. Many of them are retired law enforcement. The major casino organizations, Caesars Entertainment and MGM Resorts International are two prominent ones. They run their own security academies.
Wow.
Because the liability is so extraordinary. They have their own academies.
That's good. I mean, look, in a lot of cities, as you know, security guard companies hire kids that are, whoever's going to get paid the lowest amount of money so they can make money on those contracts, which mean that your security guards in a lot of places in the country suck. And that's not to paint the industry that way, because there's some really good guards out there. But I know some companies, man, they hire people, you're like, what were you thinking?
Well, that's to distinguish the casino security from some of the other crowd control security. They have an enormous music festival called electronic dance, EDM, electronic dance music. And it's so large they have it at the Speedway. So it has a couple 100,000 people. And it starts at 6 p.m. It's typically in June. Starts at 6 p.m., runs all night till 6 a.m. Because there aren't enough licensed security officers in the region, they have to bus them in from California. So the security companies will bus them in. Well, those people don't have a place to stay, so they just provide cots underneath the bleachers at the Speedway, and so that's. I mean, I'm sure there's some outstanding ones, but I think you can agree that if you have to bus them in from another state, you're probably not being very selective in your employment.
Yeah, well, fair enough. No, thanks for filling me in.
Yeah. Okay, so you do narco, and then you work your way into homicide. How long did you spend in homicide? Because this is the stuff that I love to hear about and talk about.
I was in homicide from 2001 till 2006.
Okay, and what's the size of the squad, and how many cases you catch in a year? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we would typically catch about 150 murders a year, between 20 and 25 officer-involved shootings or officers' use of deadly force.
So homicide is responsible for officer-involved shootings?
That's
interesting. Correct. Okay.
Yeah. Now, it has changed, but when I was there, we handled it. Okay. And we also handled it for some of the neighboring suburban areas that lack the capacity or they haven't done as many repetitions as we had. They're very good investigators, but as you know, there's a certain advantage to getting lots of reps. So when I started there was 3 squads of 6 detectives, each commanded by a sergeant. So there was 18 detectives and 3 sergeants. Shortly after, they added another squad. So we then had 24 detectives, 4 sergeants, myself. We had a clerical staff, and I had a retired detective that he didn't have the bandwidth to investigate cold cases, but would kind of go through the cold cases and set aside, he'd review them, and then those that had potential would get set aside in one stack, one that had limited potential, and then those that had no potential would go back in the shelf. Yep. And of course,
it's a good process.
As recent as 2006, our index was a WordPerfect document, and our case files were 3-ring binders. And this is, going into the mid 2000s.
Sounds like the NYPD in a lot of ways.
I'm sorry?
It sounds like the NYPD in a lot of ways. I remember when I left Bronx Homicide in 2001, our book was a bound book, a hardcover bound book, and it lasted for as many years as it took to fill up that bound book.
Right.
When I retired in 2007, they were just migrating over to the electronic case management system. And I just used to laugh. I was like, there's some carbon paper company still in business only because of the New York City Police Department, because
Right.
of all the forms they still had in 2007 with all of the, everything was 3 pieces of carbon and 4 quadruple forms. I was like, my goodness. And then I went to Philly many years later, and they were even worse.
Yeah. IBM would still be making the font ball if
Yeah.
it wasn't for
Right.
the improvements in the NYPD.
Yeah.
For all the
There's
let's
younger
typewriter.
viewers have no idea that you're talking about a Selectomatic typewriter.
Yes.
Yeah. The IBM Select, they're the best. They're the best. Pete used to carry his own little ball, and he used to use italics instead of Courier. He had italic because he thought he was special.
I was special. Olympian.
Yeah, but so Tom, you said 2001 to 2006, you had about 600 homicides. I think you said 700 homicides in that period of time.
Yeah.
And I know you have the Tupac case, which I know you can't get into details. So for the audience, if you thought you were going to get some insight, I believe there was an arrest in 2023, and it's pending trial. So no details on that. But walk us through that case, from the sensationalism, the pressure, the craziness that goes with it, and then any other big capers like that, and the details that are available and can be talked about, fine. But if not, we understand it.
Sure. So Tupac was tragically murdered in, I want to say it was 1996. So it was before I got there.
Right.
And it was, handled appropriately. All the interviews were conducted, and as you guys know, sometimes people just won't talk to the police. It always amazed me when lawyers do interviews, they assume people are telling the truth because, well, they're under oath. Cops, we talk to people, we assume they're lying because people would lie to your face if the truth had saved their lives. So,
correct.
By the time I went to homicide in 2001, the case had already lost momentum. I don't like to use the term cold case because the implication is that it's dormant, and that isn't the case. What would frustrate me is that at least once a year on the anniversary, we'd get 50 phone calls from all around the world asking for updates and asking the pointed question, why haven't you solved this case? And, the frustration is it's important. We would love to be able to bring justice to Tupac and his family. However, in that interval, there's also been another couple thousand people that are also looking for justice for their loved one. And we believe that everybody is important. And so it would frustrate me when the media would imply that this case deserved more attention than any of the others we had. And then with the advent of social media, then of course everybody's got an opinion on it. But the fact is nobody wants to solve these cases more than the detectives, because this is what we do, and we're passionate about it. But also, everybody deserves some answers for their loved one.
Absolutely.
It goes back to what I was saying earlier in the show too, Tom, is that, look, people want murders solved yesterday. And like we were talking about at the college, it's a sad reality that some cases just take a long time to get solved. Some are never solved. And the public thinks that we have like NCIS or we're that Criminal Minds where you call some nerd that's sitting in a room with a bunch of technology and she can spit out like 3 persons of interest. Then you got to just narrow it down to those 3 people in a half an hour, when we all know that that's just simply not the case. A lot of it's people leave behind evidence. Some of it's luck. Some of it's a combination of both. But in some instances, man, cases just, they take a long time to get solved, and some never get solved.
And sometimes you might have a strong suspicion as to who's responsible, but you lack the evidence to present it at trial, and you only get one bite at the apple. If you prosecute somebody and there's insufficient evidence and he gets acquitted, you can never go back to that second bite. That's why we're always, very, very careful to have the strongest case possible before we want to take it to trial.
Yeah, if only the media and the general public understood that.
Okay, so an article came out the other day. I forget the publication, but our mutual friend Pete, Joe Lestrange, commented it on social media, shared it, and had his opinions on case clearance rates. and why sometimes they're really high and sometimes they're really low. I had a person who's developing technology call me a couple of years ago, and he's in a complete panic. And he's like, Tommy, you don't understand. I'm working with this agency and I'm trying to build them a solution in technology, and they're reporting 120% clearance rate. How could that be? And so I was explaining previous years cleared can attribute. So for our audience, if you have 10 homicides in a year and you solve all 10 today, this year, and you also solved 2 from a previous year, you have 120% clearance rate for this year. So how could you have a higher than 100% clearance rate? And then the next year, because you were 10, and then you got a whole bunch of cases coming, maybe you're only at a 50. So how could you go from 120% clearance rate in this year to 50% this year, and then 65% next year, and then 100 again the next year, and then 40% the next year? And then it's all about those nuances of the cases that we're talking about, because how many cases are known to people, the offender and the victim are known to each other? How many are complete strangers? How many of them are drug deals and drive-bys and premeditated hits versus, the first? I never liked the first 48. I always called it the 72. It's the 48 plus this 24 after, because what is the people in that person's life doing as a reaction of the homicide? So that first 24 hours after, well, the first 48 after is the first 48 hours after, but what was the first 24 hours before that victim died? What were they doing in the first 20? Because if the homicide occurred against the victim that was outside of the previous 24 hours, that's a much tougher case to solve. Because that's road rage and all that stuff.
That's what made Trigger Lock very popular with some of the bosses, was we were proffering guys that were looking at a lot of time, and they come in and talk about everything they saw, everything they were involved in. So we were clearing homicides like it was going out of style, and it's because these people didn't want to go away for a long time to federal prison. So the clearance rate for a number of years in a row was close to or over 100%. And it's because people were coming in talking about stuff that was sometimes 20 years old, 15 years old. Yeah, but you're right. Your clearance rate can exceed the number of homicides that year because of the way they characterize that. Now, is that it should be? I don't know, but that's how it is.
That must be a department-wide clearance rate, because FBI rules close at December 31st. So, and this was a Vegas thing. So if somebody was murdered on New Year's Eve and you arrested and indicted the guy on New Year's Day, that case was forever uncleared because they occurred in 2 different calendar years.
Wow. Right. Yeah, it might be neat to look at it that way.
Yeah. And so, I mean, but, things tend to checks and, they tend to even out because, maybe we, in that following calendar year, we, arrested somebody that had committed a crime. Anyways, you get the point, but they have to have a beginning and an ending date. But clearance rates, I can't tell you how many arguments I have with the bosses about that.
Well, that's exactly the question I was going to ask. How did they pressure you? What was the feeling about what do you need? Where do you need to be? What did they like? What did they find acceptable?
What they didn't find acceptable was the 60, on average, 62 to 65, which was pretty much consistent across every big city, right?
Yes,
every big city.
Yep.
Then, somebody would write an article and they'd take the population of the city of Las Vegas, which is just one small part of our jurisdiction, and take the number of murders. And of course, our murder rate would be through the roof. And then the bosses would call me up screaming about that. And I'd be like, settle down. The researcher didn't understand. But that was, if there's 2 things that used to make me bananas, it was clearance rates. And I was so sick and tired of answering questions about motive. They always, what's the motive? We don't even know who it is. And you're asking me about motive. And, as we all know, it comes down to drugs, gangs, domestic violence. If you're not in a violent relationship, if you're not a drug user or seller, if you're not involved in a street gang, the likelihood of you dying from a homicide is very remote.
Yep.
But
so we had a chief in the New York City Police Department, chief of the department, highest uniformed member. His name was Louis Anamone. I loved him. He was tough but fair. Comstat, brutal but fair. And he used to say, motive. And what's the motive, Lieutenant? And I would get, so you'd go with a precinct commander who was a captain or a deputy inspector. Then the narcotics lieutenant would come to fill in the gaps. And there was a reason, and that's what I'm getting to. And then the detective commander, which was so three of us would go and represent the jurisdiction. And he would say, what's the motive? And if you said, I don't know yet, we haven't determined that, his feeling was, it's drugs until you prove otherwise. And he was mostly right. And if there was some nuance to the case that you could say, I know it's not drugs, but I don't know if it's something else. But come on, a kid gets shot on a tree corner, it's drugs.
the problem with that is, and these were frequent. So you have a drug dealer who happens to belong to a street gang who kills his girlfriend. So is it a DV case? Is it a drug case? Is it a gang case? Because all of them had some influence on it. I just, as a finder of fact, we never really cared about the whys. We cared about the other W's, but the whys, who's to say?
Yep. So homicide, any other big capers, sensational cases that interesting twisting turn, maybe wasn't sensational, but just really fascinating, twisty, turvy, unpredictable cases that you had before we go into the counterterrorism stuff?
So, I mean, they've done lots of episodes on, various dramas. We did a couple first 48s. We did a couple, Dateline NBCs. We were talking earlier about the bosses and how they particularly cared about the high profile cases. So it was my last murder case. And the call comes in, a guy's driving down the highway. And this is a highway that will take you to a small town called Pahrump in a different county where the brothels are. And the truck driver's driving there. He sees a vehicle on fire out in the middle of the desert. So he calls it in. We get out there. Because when they were putting out the fire, they popped the trunk and there's a body in the trunk. So, and it was a Jaguar, I think. So it's the holidays. It's probably about, 2006, about today's date. So I call the captain and I'm briefing him and he's just not interested because, Tom, I already told you I only care about the high profile cases. I'm like, okay, I'm just letting you know because we don't know what's going on. So, and he tells me, he goes, I'm leaving town for the holidays. You're in charge. So, and this is right before I'm leaving. So, turns out as we go to make the death notification, the next of kin, the owner of the car actually answers the door. So you can imagine the detective's surprise when the woman that we think is in the trunk is actually standing there in front of us at the door. So the investigation continues. Turns out that they are world-class bodybuilders. Kelly Ryan is the woman and Craig Titus is the man. Both world-class, And so the investigation would continue. We would find out that the decedent in the trunk had been brutally tortured. She had duct tape wrapped around her mouth. She had been tased before being set on fire. But because of the high-profile nature of the two suspects, now all of a sudden it was high profile, and the captain, of course, had left for vacation, so it was he was getting all the phone calls about what's going on, and he didn't know anything about it because, well, he didn't really care when I phoned him up that particular time. Ultimately, they would become fugitives. I only mention this as a high-profile case because I can point to at least 3 docudramas that have been made by the Oxygen Network and Lifetime and all of this sort of stuff.
Sure.
But, as we were saying, the politicians and the bosses only want to know about the high profile cases. The problem is we don't know which ones. We don't get to decide what's high profile. The media decides that for us.
Right.
And in this
That's
case,
right.
he got burned for it. So, I mean, there's dozens of kind of interesting cases.
What was the reason for that murder, Tom, if you know?
Yeah, it was a bit of jealousy because there was a love triangle going on. It was fueled by drugs because they were all drug users. There was some allegations of theft that never got proven, but chalk it up to interpersonal dispute, I guess.
Was it the husband and wife that killed her?
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
I've heard of Craig Titus. I remember that name back in the day.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned it, wow.
Because he's a bodybuilder, and
very well known.
Exactly. And so what they did is we had video of him and her. They go to a Walmart. He stays in the car. Body's in the trunk. She runs into a Walmart, empties the shelves of lighter fluid in a Bic lighter. He calls a buddy who follows them out into the desert. He sets the car on fire. They jump into the buddy's truck, and the buddy takes him back to town. Now the buddy, is just some kid who wants to be a bodybuilder, and he kind of idolizes this charismatic figure. He ended up cooperating with the police, but we had the video of her walking in and pulling every bottle of lighter fluid off the shelf.
Wow, good case, but terrible.
Yeah,
Does that look familiar?
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, for sure.
There they are. He's got some guns, not as big as yours, Pete, but big. And
yeah, hey, you know what? Steroids must have got to his brain, man, because you don't do shit like that. You don't kill people.
Right. Yeah. He's a lot smaller now. He's been in prison since 2006.
You would think he'd have a lot more
time. I thought you get big in prison.
Yeah, but you don't have the substances, man.
You don't
have that help. You got to do it natural in jail.
Oh, yeah. So I have a question on homicides before we switch to Homeland and counterterrorism. Transient people, a lot of tourism, homicides, people coming from outside involved, witnesses, complainants, victims, perpetrators, like a lot of travel for the homicide team in Vegas?
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned, witnesses. So the DA has to have a sizable budget to fly the witnesses in to testify. But yes, that's an issue. Are tourists typically killed? No. Most of the time, our victims are locals. I think my at least one of the earbuds is losing battery, so I'll charge one. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. I never understood that. We used to have homicides that we would investigate when I was in ATF, and they would always be told, send the collateral, have an agent in the other field division go out and do the interview because it'll save us money. Yeah, no, Tommy, I agree. Because first off, nobody knows the case like the guys that are working it. But let's be realistic. When the time comes for trial prep and the DA or AUSA wants to interview the people who did these interviews, sometimes multiple times, it's cheaper to just let the people working the case do it in the first place rather than fly some agent from another part of the country back and forth for trial prep. So I never understood the rationale where people think they're saving money when they're saving pennies to throw away dollars down the road. But no one knows the case like the people that are actually working it.
You're 100% correct, and our colleagues with the FBI are famous for that. They send out a lead to another field office, and that's how they get the information. But I'm in complete agreement with you. Which, if you have time for another story, I'll share that one. It was really interesting. So this one would date back to 2000. So I was in sex crimes at the time. And we had a series of sexual assaults. The first one began where he simply pushed his weight in the apartment and raped the lady inside. And then there was about 5 or 6 with increasing uses of force as well as forcible entry. And in each one of these occasions, there was something that was used to prevent DNA from being left behind. So in one occasion, he used the cellophane wrapper from a cigarette package as a makeshift condom. Another time, he used the bread bag as a makeshift. But the point is he took extraordinary measures to prevent his DNA from being left behind. One time, he actually he poured lighter fluid on the woman and set the entire apartment on fire. She survived, but it prevented the recovery of DNA. And then he kicked in a door on his final assault, but he picked the wrong door, and it was a man inside, and he ended up shooting the man inside. So now it started out with a series of robberies. It escalated into sexual assault with increasing levels of violence up to homicide. So in our agency, 3 different units, all geographically separated. So we kind of put our heads together, and this is one of those occasions where the assistance from all hands on deck really paid its dividends. So we gathered up a bunch of the buccal swab, the collection kits.
Yep.
For those that aren't familiar, they're little like brushes that you swab the inside of a cheek that collects white blood cells or the epithelial cells, and they're the best source of DNA with limited intrusion. So we sent patrol out there, and they were stopping people, and they get consensual buccal cell swabs. And lo and behold, we get a hit. And this took, a bit of cooperation from our lab because, as you know, there's a backlog. But, it was crystal clear to everybody that this was going to turn out badly because of the level of violence that was escalated. So we had kind of come up with this theory because of the level of violence that was being escalated, because of the extraordinary measures that had been taken to prevent the recovery of DNA. We're thinking, this guy, he's been arrested. He's probably an ex-con because, in prison, they just become better criminals. So we're thinking of somebody in their mid-30s, somebody that doesn't have the social skills to, not be violent and push his way in. Well, when the hit came back, we were stunned. It was a 16-year-old kid with no criminal history.
Wow.
16-year-old kid.
Wow. Yeah, amazing.
So,
wow. Was he oversized? Like, was the physical description coming different than? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he was man-sized, but
right.
I'm not a big man. So, he wasn't a giant, but he was a man size.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one kind of threw us back. Now he is still in prison, but I would like to say we caught him in the nick of time, but we didn't because one man is dead because of it. But I think
more would be dead if we didn't catch him. That's for sure.
I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Yep. So Chief Rob Lukash wants to know, was CompStat ever introduced into Vegas? And if so, how was it perceived by the rank and file? I'll add to that. How was it administered? Was it adversarial? Was it polite? Was it a combination? Great question, Chief. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad that came up. So I had a front row seat for this because I had been newly assigned to sexual assault, and 2 of our administrators had just come back from New York, where they sat through one of the CompStats, and they said, we're going to implement it here. It was in its first iteration. It was a magnificent thing. So what it was I had a sexual assault series, and it was administrators sitting there, and the case got briefed to the administrators, and our head of agency would say, okay, what do you need, Tom? And I would say, okay, if I didn't come with a plan, it would have been humiliating for me, but I came with a plan. I said, I need this, I need this, I need this. And one of the things I needed were some PCs, some computers to help process the leads. They didn't have laptops back then. And the captain in charge of IT says, well, I don't know if we can. And the chief of agency says, apparently you didn't hear him. He said he needs computers. Make it happen. So that was the first iteration. I think that was the way it was initially intended in Newark as well. It was intended to do two things. It was to ensure that the captains, the precinct commanders, had accountability for things in their area of responsibility. And I think it was designed to make sure that the people that were doing the work had the resources to get the job done.
Yes.
This was, or we'll say 2000. And 2025, it has turned into a game show where you have the area commanders being quizzed on the tiniest little nuance about every single crime that occurred, because the deputy chiefs or assistant sheriffs pulled a file out. And so now the question from the chief was, how is it perceived by the rank and file? So now the process is known as Stump the Chump, where
Stump a chump.
Yeah.
We used to call it just gotcha. We used to just say they've converted to a game of gotcha. They just keep asking questions to gotcha, but Stump a Chump is 10 times better.
Yeah. So that's I would say, devolution of that process. Do I think it has some merit? Yes, because I think that it is vitally important that the geographical commanders understand what's going on in their area of responsibility. However, by doing pop quizzes on them about everything, they're responsible to make sure the stuff gets done, not know what is being done. That's my viewpoint. That's
good leadership. Pete, you want to jump in on leadership on that one?
No. Hey, look, leaders need to be held accountable, but you got to do it fairly. And look, as we knew, Tommy, CompStat started out with well-intended, but when it got really personal and kind of cutthroat, it caused people to start swaying numbers, right? We saw that. It's what's happening in many other places. So, I don't like when look, again, sometimes you need to stick to the roots of something. And when you try to evolve it into something bigger and better, it loses its value. I think that's what happened with CompStat in a lot of places. They tried to evolve into something when they didn't have to. Just keep it for what it was,
Yeah. So to the leadership point, and to add on to that is like going back to it, Tom, is I'm in charge. I've got a lot of people. I've got first line, second line, and then I got the rank and file. You can't know everything that's going on, but have I empowered the people underneath me to get the job done? And do I trust them to do it? And let them do it. And then the stats will, show themselves. There's a lot of going on in the country. It's always been going on from the day I got on in 1986. There's always been reporting issues. It's always going to be whatever. But whether I'm in private sector now, I don't know everything that's going on, but I have people I trust underneath me, and the people that they hire, only hire the people and get the job done. And if I'm interviewing for a job of a potential manager tomorrow, I was like, if you give me this job, you don't have to worry about anything. I'm going to take care of it. And you don't need to know every detail and every nuance. I'm just going to take care of it. It's going to be taken care of. So There needs to be down pressure of the multiple layers from those executives all the way down. It's like the job's getting done. What are you worried about? Some graffiti in some corner of the neighborhood and guys hanging out. We're clearing those corners. To quote my favorite TV episode, series, police procedural, The Wire, clear the corners. So anyway, we are 8:40 Eastern, so we're an hour and 40 in. Tom, any final career highlights, anything, any big capers, sensational, especially counterterrorism and homeland security stuff before we shift to your post law enforcement career? Because we definitely got to talk hockey tonight.
It was a wild ride. I mean, here's this kid from the East Coast who ended up in the middle of the desert with a blossoming city. In getting on the first step of the escalator as it went through the top. Now, clearly, my career trajectory kind of got stunted. I spent 18 years at the rank of lieutenant, so my career trajectory didn't continue on. A good friend of mine and the guy I work closely with now sits in the governor's office. So, his trajectory certainly continued, but it's been a wild ride. Like the old saying goes, we have a front row seat to the strangest show on earth.
Yes. So comment. Modern Samurai, a good friend, all the shows on the Finest Unfiltered, Comstat, Narcostat, Traffic Stat, Graffiti Stat, Dumbass Shit Stat. So it's evolved and gotten out of control. And just a message to all the commanders across the country in every agency: slow it down, get a grip, find out what's really important, and focus on the things that are really important. Don't get tied up into the nonsense.
Yep.
So you did talk about the difference between a criminal investigation and a counterterrorism investigation. I think that spoke for itself. Definitely, it's probably a lot of sensitive stuff, so we don't need to get into that. So if you don't have any final thoughts, I'd love to shift to how you got to the post-naval, and then how you ended up back in Vegas with the Golden Knights.
Sure. I got my graduate degree from MPS, and they have a fellowship program. So I was an advisor back in Washington, D.C. That was a 1-year contract. I came back to Las Vegas. I did some work consulting. I helped write the emergency plans for the Las Vegas Raiders football club and some other stuff. And then a hockey team started here.
Shows up.
And yep. And so the special advisor to the team owner, a guy I've known for 20 odd years, played pro hockey. His name is Murray Craven. And he and I have been buddies.
Blackhawks?
Murray? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Blackhawks.
I'm a hockey guy. Come on, Tom.
Yeah. Philly. He's went to the Stanley Cup Finals in Philly. So Murray and I have been friends forever. And he was advising the owner. He knew that they would need security eventually, so he asked me to get my resume to him. He got it in front of the newly appointed GM, George McPhee, and George asked me to come down and talk with him, and we just clicked. I mean, I sat down in his office. He had a son that was going to Boston College. He had spent 17 years in Washington. We talked about that. We talked about everything except for security. And he pulls out my resume and he goes, Tom, he goes, I have to admit, I'm a little confused. He goes, with this resume, you could do a lot of things. He goes, this job doesn't pay a lot. At first it was just game days. At home I didn't travel. Well, there's a story to that. So he goes, why would you want to do this when you can do so much more? I said, George, I got to tell you, since I've been 5 years old, I've been part of a team, Little League, Pee Wee football, whatever. And then you'd come to Vegas and I was part of a big team. And then I went to go work, for the feds in consulting, and I wasn't part of a team. And I think looking at your faces says there's a lot of north. It's part of our essence. It's part of who we are. And without being part of a team, we feel like there's a piece of us that's missing. And so I was simply looking to be part of a team again. And that really resonated with George, and he hired me on the spot. He says, we don't need you to travel with the team until the playoffs. So I go home, I tell the wife I've been hired, and I said, but don't worry, I don't need to travel full time except for the playoffs. And we're an expansion team, so it's going to be 5 or 6 years.
We're not going to make it. We're not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Well,
and even if we do, maybe the first round, right?
Yeah, we would go all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals in our first season. So what a ride. But the point of this story will become evident soon. So we finish our final preseason game, and the San Jose Sharks are playing at our home arena at the T-Mobile. And one of our expansion draftees was a player from Nashville, James Neal. And he was really good friends with Jason Aldean, the country singer. And so he had lined up VIP seats for all of the team at Route 91 concert in Las Vegas. And it's October 1st, 2017. So as it would turn out, Nealer decided he wasn't going to go to the show. He wanted to get some more rehab ice because the regular season was going to be starting in a couple of days. So he backed out. And of course, the other players said, if you're not going, Nealer, we're not going. So they went to dinner. They went to a variety of different places on the strip, but they walked from our game arena, which is the T-Mobile, right by the New York hotel. So they walked to the Cosmopolitan Hotel. So it was an early game. It was a 5:00 game. So by 9:00, because I'm an old man, I'm asleep. And the phone rings, and it's somebody from the team, and they said, "Tommy, are you watching the news?" I flip on the news, and the shooting was still going on. You could hear it, and from our experience, we could tell it was automatic gunfire.
Yeah.
So they said, "We've got 10 players at the Cosmo. We need you to get them out. Can you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know how, but I'll get them out." So I grabbed a rifle, I grabbed a sidearm, and I'm grabbing my keys downstairs, and my phone rings, and I look at the display, and it's my counterpart with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is odd. So I answer the phone, and he's in tears. He goes, "Tom, my nephew was at the concert. He got away, but he's got no one. Can you help me?" So I took the kid's phone number. I gave him a call. I knew where he was. He was going to be safe. And I'm now walking out to the garage, and he goes, "I got separated from my girlfriend. Can you pick her up?" I'm like, Jesus, I got 10 people over here. You're over here. Well, come to find out, this young lady in the chaos ran away with somebody else that was there. They were able to get a ride, and the other young lady lived down the street from me. She lived a block and a half away. So picked her up, dropped her off with my wife. The young man was able to get an Uber, and he Ubered to my house. My wife said he was from the knees down, just covered with blood and brain matter. He had run nonstop for 6 miles before he stopped. He was just that scared. So now I got to get to the Cosmo. Now, this, of course, is October 1st, 2017. The story actually begins in 2008. So you may remember that there was a terrorist attack in Mumbai, India, where terrorists took over a couple of hotels, the Taj Mahal and the Trident Oberoi. There was a contingent of police officials from LAPD and Vegas, and we flew out there to study the attack, not from a crime-solving perspective, but more hey, we have tall buildings. What would we do if this happened here? So Mike Downing, do you know Mike, Tommy?
Yes,
he's
from LAPD.
Retired. Exactly. So Mike Downing,
Yep.
His adjutant, Mark Stainbrook, who's now chief of police for Beverly Hills, Joe Lombardo, who is now the governor of Nevada, myself, and a few. In case you hadn't noticed, there's that distinction in career trajectories, right? They're all big shots. And
come on, though. You were noble. You stayed there in the field.
Well, somebody had to do the work, right?
Yeah. So
in any event, we go to Mumbai, and we made a couple observations that would become relevant to the shooting. Number one, the attackers always took the high ground and then were shooting down. Number two, when they were shooting down to responding firefighters. And in Mumbai, as there were more people that died of fire and fire-related injuries than from firearms. So it was the first notion of fire as a weapon. And then three, the notion of developing these hybrid rescue task forces. So we have force protection for EMS, so they can go into a warm zone and start treating before you can exfiltrate them to a casualty collection point. So those lessons learned from Mumbai in 2007 would become really vital and relevant in 2017 because it saved a lot of lives. Now, in Vegas, in Boston, for example, when the explosions went off, you had these massive amputational injuries, and video showed what the attack was. In Vegas, you had all this gunfire, and it was they were 5.56 rounds. So you had lots of internal injuries, but these people were fleeing. They had been shot. They were dying. They just didn't know it yet. So they're running into these neighboring hotels, and then they're falling out in these hotels. So the expectation is, in a realistic expectation, is we had multiple attackers. We had multiple venues under attack, as we had seen in Mumbai. So all of the casinos up and down the strip went into lockdown. So I've got these players there at the Cosmo. We don't know if they're safe, but they can't get out. So because I knew the strip pretty well from having worked there, and I drive a 4x4 pickup truck, so I was able to bounce over curbs and cut through parking lots and all of that about the time that they opened up the doors. But I had yet to meet any of the players. I didn't know what they looked like.
Right.
And so I had seen one of the players, Nate Schmidt. I had seen him play in Washington. So I got his number, and we were able to communicate, and we were able to load everybody up in a couple trucks, and I got them home, and that was how I met them. Kind of certainly helps in establishing a trust level with your players.
Yeah.
And then the next day, they were out there handing out food. They were, giving blood. The players, the team, were unbelievable. And as a consequence of that, the city of Las Vegas and its residents just completely embraced this team, and they are held up as local heroes.
God bless them.
Wow. That is a wild story for you,
Right.
Probably because, like, one of the most emotional and adrenaline charged jobs post career, like not even while you were still on the job.
Right.
One of your biggest capers is actually in retirement.
Right.
That's
right.
wild.
Yeah. And
That's
my
wild.
son, that was his first day after field training. He was assigned to be on the perimeter of that. He goes, Dad,
Wow.
he goes, I don't know what Gettysburg was like. He goes, but I watched puddles of blood vibrating, rippling, because the cell phones were going off, and it was causing these big puddles of blood to ripple. So that was his first day out of field training.
Wow.
I saw a
Welcome
recent documentary about that shooting. And I'll tell you what, man, we've seen a lot of things in our career. That was mind blowing to watch. I mean, just even how long the shooting took place, because they didn't know, was it multiple shooters? Where's it coming from? I think it was Netflix, but I'm not sure. It was absolutely, it was infuriating, frustrating, heartbreaking, terrifying to watch. That something like that would happen on U.S. soil. But yeah, man, anybody that responded to that, man, has my deepest respect, because that was something else, man. Unlike anything I've ever come close to responding to, perhaps other than 9/11. But granted, two different scenarios. 9/11 happened. It wasn't an ongoing situation. It happened and we responded, where these cops had to respond to an ongoing situation where shots were being fired en masse from a high point elevation down on a crowd. Unbelievable. But yeah, I'm glad your son made it, Tom, and I'm glad that the hockey team did as well.
And you and everybody else.
Yeah.
That is a crazy story. And I will say, not happy that I don't know the motive. Like, you talked about motives before, but like, we don't know anything. We don't know anything about Paddock. We don't know anything about Paddock, and I don't like it. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
We don't need to dive into it. All right. So what is it like? We're an hour and 50 minutes in. We're going to start wrapping up. What is it like traveling with the team? You got these young players. It's not just a Canadian, North American with a little bit of America. You got players from all over the world now. It's a new hockey from the hockey we grew up with. I'm a big Islanders fan. George McPhee had a little bit of time on the Islanders. He didn't spend a lot of time there. I am a 4-time Stanley Cup fan, and I had the 1980 Olympics and the gold medal, and my boy Ken Morrow jumps over and 3 months later wins the Stanley Cup. I'll give you Boston, Jim Craig winning the Stanley Cup there. Like, my youth in hockey was the most exciting, wonderful 80s, Brian Trottier, Mike Bossy, the sniper. I have a story for another day of me on the desk in the 7-7 precinct taking a phone call from Wayne Gretzky because his chauffeur was speeding through our precinct and he had to fire the guy. And then he got sued. Wayne Gretzky got sued for wrongful termination. And I got I got hockey, and I used to get the media guide as a kid. And they used to say where they used to stay. And I called all the hotels and said, can I talk to Wayne Gretzky, Mike Bossy? And I used to talk to players as a 17-year-old kid and talking. So I am a hockey nut job. So you're living a great police career, Tom, that we're all appreciative of and respect. And now you're, at least for me as a hockey fan, helping these kids stay safe, keeping them clean, keeping them good, getting their job done so they can go out and play and not be distracted by the outside world. What is it like for you? Wrap it up. What a great job. And then I'm going to show a picture that anyone who's a hockey fan will appreciate. So go ahead, tell us what it's like with the Golden Knights.
It is a dream come true. And I am keenly aware that I have a job that millions of retired cops would love to have. So I am always humbled by that fact that I am just the luckiest guy in the world in that regard. The hockey players are phenomenal human beings. You're right; they come from all over the world. There's Russians, there's Swedes. We have a Swiss on our team, some Americans, mostly Canadians. They are amazing human beings. I seldom have to act in a security role because they seldom misbehave. You know, we play 82 games before the playoffs, and the playoffs are 2.5 months, which means that they're on the road 100 times a year, 100 nights a year. They don't have a lot of time to get in shenanigans. I have, but since they were 14 or 15 years old, they have been removed from their home and their families. In the U.S., they go to the U.S. Development Program. In Canada, they go off to the junior program. So they don't know how to do some things that we've taught our sons. I've taught them how to change car batteries. I've showed them how to replace a garbage disposal, you know, and they over the moon over it.
That's awesome.
We were the year after the pandemic. They had a shortened season, and we would play 2 games in a city before we move on, which is not typical. Typically, we play a city and then we move on. So we're in Minnesota, and we're at a hotel, and it's near the Vikings training camp, and it's in between the 2 games. And you know, we've had our supper, and some of the guys are playing cards. Most of the guys are on their phones, like 20-something-year-old, you know, people will do. And I'm like, you know what, the hell with it. So I pull out a laptop, and I got one of the younger kids to plug it in because technology is not my thing. And I had a couple case studies that I've been providing to Academy, you know, murder cases. And so I'm going through it, and I'm asking questions, you know, kind of like CSI type of stuff. And before long, I see that the phones are set down on the table, and the cards are down, and they're not dealing. And pretty soon, all the eyes are on me, and I'm walking through it. And so we run a murder case, and that particular one, there was an arrest and conviction and all of that stuff. And so they really liked it, and they're like, "Hey, Tom, do you have another one?" Well, in fact, I do. So ran another case by. This one has not led to an arrest. It was a young lady that was buried in the middle of the desert. Somebody had dug a trench, poured some concrete, dropped the body in, then filled it up with concrete. And this is miles outside the city. So in any event, the next day, and everybody's happy, they go off to bed. The next day, the guys are in the dressing room putting on their gear. One of the players, he goes, "Hey, Tommy, come here." I'm like, "Hey, man, what's up?" He goes, "I think you need to go back after this one guy. I think he's good for it." I'm like, "Huh?" He goes, "I think you really need to, you know, push this guy. I think he's good for it." I'm like, "Have you been thinking?" I couldn't sleep all night. I've been thinking about it all night. So they're phenomenal kids. They're phenomenal athletes. and I can't speak highly enough about in the organization from top to bottom. I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Okay, so as a kid growing up with the expansion, the original 6, and then they add another 6, and then you got the Penguins, the Flyers, and all of the Blues, and all those kinds of cats, right? And you got Terry Sawchuk playing for the Blues. Like, what's the kind of craziness is that, right?
Right.
However, my Islanders come in 72, and that's when I picked them up. And everyone said, because I grew up in Brooklyn, how could you be an Islander fan from Long Island when you should be a Ranger fan? Because I caught them in their 3rd year of upsetting the Rangers in the best of 3, right? And I was like, and that was unheard of. Like, such success for an expansion team in its 3rd year. So what was it like in Vegas for an expansion team to go to the finals? That is crazy.
Yeah, it was nuts. And, we played the finals in Washington, who had not won a Stanley Cup in their existence. Our GM had come from Washington after 17 years, and we're playing. They were called the Golden Misfits, so we had everybody's throwaways, essentially.
Yeah.
And yet, in spite of that, they came within a couple games of winning the most cherished trophy in all of professional sports.
Yep. And then a couple of years later, because we're getting late, a couple of years later, they actually come back and win the cup. Was it 23?
Yeah, 2023.
Yep. So walk us through the journey through the season. How did they feel going through that and then hitting the playoffs? And I argue, and I don't think any sports fan could argue, the hardest title to win is those 4 series leading to Lord Stanley's Cup.
Yeah, I think most people agree with that assessment that it is the most difficult championship to win. It sounds trite, and I know you hear it all the time, but it is 100% the truth. We just took each game as it came, and then we got past the I think it was the LA Kings in the first series, and like, okay, well now we gotta beat Edmonton, and they're a really, really good team, and we ended up getting past them. And then next we're faced Dallas, and of course Dallas has beaten us before. And so by the time we got to Florida, something had changed. Like, hey, we can do this. We have a really, really good team. We were healthy. And I think by the time we got to the finals, we had great confidence that we're going to take this thing. And so, yeah, what a ride. What a ride.
So this is the ultimate picture that's up on the screen. For those of you who are listening, sorry you can't see it, but those of you who are watching, we got Tom hoisting the Stanley Cup. And I love the scoreboard in the back. Final, Knights 9, Panthers 3. Wow.
Right.
Right. Like, I would have, as a fan, I would have loved to have seen a 4-3 game. But, man, that must have felt so good having such a cushion going into that and then being able to do this. So,
yeah.
Awesome job.
It allowed the staff to prepare the locker room for the champagne showers and all of that stuff. So if we have time, I've got a funny story about the morning after the Stanley Cup. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, I do. I just want to know who's wearing the shirts that said Florida Panthers Stanley Cup champions. Do you know what they do with those?
Yeah, I think they go to India or Bangladesh or something like that.
I love that.
So they're donating. Yeah.
That is my favorite story. The Super Bowl champion losers, and then you see all of these places in these countries and they're wearing us. So we're going to end that. I want to give a shout out to Rob Lukash again. Great comments all night. Potvin sucks. Yeah, that's the chant. New York Rangers, but Norris Trophy winner, Hall of Famer. Yeah, and he even loved it. Potvin even loved it. He did.
Tom, you said you had a follow-up story?
Yeah, and then Ron Layson's daughter works for the New York Islanders. He sent me a picture on a text just now with her in a Stanley Cup, but I can't pull it up in time to get it. But maybe we'll do that next week. But go ahead, Tom. Final story, and we're going to wrap it up.
Very briefly, so it's 8 o'clock in the morning now. The Stanley Cup has some contractual obligations to go with the team to various nightclubs. So they go off. I'm like, you have my number. Call me if you need me. So I just shower and I'm laying in bed. 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. All of the TV production trucks were parked along the building at the loading dock of the arena. The problem is they can't get them out because all the players' cars are parked in the middle. So they can't get them out. So, of course, none of them are answering their phones. So I drive down to the game arena. I knew where the players keep their key fobs, but so I'm going around trying to find their cars. The problem is I have no idea how to start a Lamborghini, right? So I'm looking around for buttons. I don't know. So I call my son, who before he was a cop, he was a valet parker. I have to call him. Now, the problem is he was out with the players partying all night. So he's not too happy to get my phone call. He tells me how to. So I get it started. Now I'm trying to put it in gear. I'm used to 3 on the tree. There's no gear shift. There's not even a little button. Turns out it's paddle shifters. But yeah, so while they're all sleeping it off, in case you're wondering what an NHL security guy does, well, he's a valet attendant the day after you win a Stanley Cup.
That's great. One final thought. Rob Lukash, when you were talking about the story at Mandalay Bay, truly an amazing story. You're a leader, outstanding hero. And then we got 2 stickers. Modern Samurai, $20 to the chat. Really appreciate Dr. DJ 1999 super sticker. So thanks for the contributions to the chat. Really appreciate everybody. So Pete, go ahead. Final thoughts.
Oh man, great stories. Good to cross paths with you. I wish we did it, in person and in a professional context back in the day. And I hope we do cross paths in the future. But no, man, good stuff. I'm honored to chat with you. It was great having you on the show, man. Very interesting stories. Good stuff.
Thank you for having me.
No, it was great. What a good time. And like I said, because Pete is negative $80 in the podcast, I just want to make it very clear that we're doing this out of a labor of love because we're in love with the profession. We have met amazing people all across the country for our 30-something. My anniversary, January 9th, will be my 40th year in the industry. I've met the most amazing people. I can pick up the phone the way I did with you, not talk to you for such a long time. We pick up exactly where we left off, and it's just what it is. All of the troops that I've worked with, the cops, none of them have ever said in 40 years, I haven't talked to you in 10 years, why are you calling me now? It doesn't matter. We are a special group and a special bond of people who really, truly cared about the communities we served and the partners that we had in completing that mission. Because it is about the community. And we talked about it last week. Anyone who thinks that you can't be an intrusive, Eric Dim, shout out to you, proactive police officer, and also be compassionate and empathetic, you're wrong. You don't know anything about cops.
Yep.
You can be both. You can be both.
That's right.
So with that, thanks, Tom. What a great. Please stay on for 5 more minutes because after we do the outro, we'll just rehash and make sure everything's clear on our end. So hang on 5 more minutes. If there's nothing else, I'm going to go outro. Let me pull up Pete, your book. Pete still The Deadly Path. So go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier. Brian Terry was murdered with a gun that was trafficked as part of an ATF investigation. Eric Holder and many others in government lied when they were called on the carpet about it. It's just a true story about what I saw, what I witnessed, why I spoke up, what happened for speaking up, and how I went on with my life after. So it's a true story, nothing speculative. It's just what I experienced and what I personally saw. So if you choose to buy it, thanks for your support and hope you enjoy reading it. Please review it. So that's it.
All right, every Tuesday and Thursday, Sal Greco Show on the Finest Unfiltered Podcast, 1:05 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tomorrow night at 17:05 hours, Wednesday, December 17th, Rob and Ron are going to get into the questionable responses to the active shooter cases. They're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the responses and tactics and how they did it. Rob ran the special was a deputy chief in the Special Operations Division. Ron Layson, commanding officer, multiple commands. They have an interesting executive perspective. And then every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the finest unfiltered, John, Eric, and Marlon break down the latest current events, things going on in New York City, in the New York City Police Department, in New York City politics, and around the country in law enforcement. Finest Unfiltered on YouTube, but for the Ten-Four Tavern on X, on Instagram and Facebook at Ten-Four Tavern. And then Pete and I are most prominent on LinkedIn. You'll find us there. And then we have a webpage on LinkedIn, 10-4 Tavern Podcast. So with that, good night, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Please stay safe, everybody. Next week, we have Monty Bynum, former Georgia Bureau of Investigation, former U.S. always a U.S. Marine. And Pete and Monty will get deep into leadership because that's their big thing. So same week from today, December 23rd, right before Christmas, Monty Bynum, former Georgia Bureau of Investigation, current, always a Marine, on leadership is going to be the main topic, and whatever current events might unfold into that time. Please stay on, guys. We're going to do the outro now and talk to you in a bit. Good night, everybody.